Sarah's life had never been easy. From the moment she became a mother, everything seemed like a constant uphill battle. She lived in a small rented apartment at the corner of an old building, where the paint on the walls peeled off and the roof sometimes leaked when it rained. Every morning, she woke up before the sun to prepare breakfast for her little boy, Adam. He was only 6 years old, full of innocence and dreams, and the only reason Sarah never gave up. The mornings were always the hardest. Sarah would pack a small lunch for Adam, often just a sandwich and fruit, and walk him to school before rushing off to one of her jobs. She worked at a local grocery store, stacking shelves and attending to customers. The pay was hardly enough to cover rent, bills, and Adam's school expenses, but she had no choice. After her shift ended, she would clean houses for extra cash. By the time she came home in the evening, her body ached, but she still managed a smile for Adam. Sarah had once dreamed of a happy family. When she married her husband, she thought life would finally be safe and full of love. But dreams don't always come true. Her husband left suddenly, unable to bear the responsibilities of fatherhood. He walked out one morning and never returned, leaving Sarah alone with their newborn child and unpaid bills. At first, she was devastated. Nights were spent crying quietly while holding Adam in her arms, but slowly she realized she had to stand strong. Her child depended on her, and she could not afford to break down. Her sister Emily's life had been very different. Emily was beautiful, outgoing, and always surrounded by people who admired her. She had met a wealthy man named Richard, who came from a family of business owners, and soon after, they got engaged. For Sarah, hearing about the wedding brought mixed emotions. On one hand, she was truly happy for her sister. On the other hand, she couldn't ignore the quiet voice inside her that whispered she didn't belong in such a grand celebration. When Emily invited her to the wedding, Sarah hesitated. She looked at her wardrobe and saw only simple clothes, worn out from years of use. She could not afford to buy a fancy dress, nor could she hire someone to do her hair or makeup. But she wanted to be there. Emily was her sister, and despite the differences in their lives, Sarah loved her dearly. So she decided to go, determined not to let her poverty stop her from standing by Emily's side on such an important day. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, Sarah worked even harder. She saved every small amount she could. Some nights, she skipped meals just to put aside money for Adam's shoes or for a small gift she wanted to bring to her sister's wedding. She wanted to show that even if she didn't have much, she still cared. Adam noticed his mother's exhaustion and sometimes asked, "Mom, why do you look so tired?" Sarah would only smile and say, "Because I'm making sure you'll have a bright future, my love." Finally, the wedding day arrived. Sarah woke up early, bathed Adam, and dressed him in the neatest clothes he had. She had ironed his shirt the night before, careful to smooth out every wrinkle. For herself, she chose a modest dress, one she had worn years ago but kept clean and pressed for special occasions. Standing in front of the small cracked mirror in her room, she applied a touch of lipstick and pulled her hair back. She looked at her reflection and told herself, "This is enough. I am going for my sister." As she held Adam's little hand and walked toward the wedding hall, she felt both nervous and hopeful. The hall was decorated with flowers and golden lights. Guests in expensive suits and elegant dresses arrived in shiny cars, stepping out gracefully. Sarah felt small in comparison, but she held her head high. She reminded herself that she was here because of love for her sister, not to compete with anyone. Inside, the wedding was like something out of a movie. The chandeliers sparkled, music played softly, and waiters moved around with trays of drinks and appetizers. Sarah guided Adam to a seat at the back, hoping they could blend in quietly. She smiled warmly at Emily from a distance, her heart swelling with pride. For a moment, Sarah forgot about her worries. She thought, maybe today would be a good day after all. But as she sat there, she began to notice the glances. People turned their heads, whispering behind their hands. Some looked her up and down, their eyes filled with judgment. A woman nearby nudged her friend and muttered something, and they both laughed softly while looking at Sarah. She pretended not to notice, but inside, her heart ached. Adam, innocent and unaware, tugged at her arm and said, "Mom, isn't it pretty here?" Sarah kissed his forehead and whispered, "Yes, sweetheart. Very pretty." She tried to keep her focus on her sister, telling herself nothing else mattered. Yet the feeling of being out of place grew stronger. The rich guests with their polished smiles and diamond jewelry seemed to belong to a different world altogether. Sarah, in her simple dress and with her son by her side, felt like a stranger who had stepped into a life not meant for her. Still, she sat quietly, determined to witness Emily's happiness, no matter how others looked at her. As the ceremony began, Sarah clasped her hands together, silently praying for her sister's future. She hoped Emily's marriage would bring her the love and stability Sarah herself had lost. For a few minutes, she even allowed herself to dream, what if life could change for her too? What if one day she could give Adam a better life, one where he didn't have to see his mother struggle so much? Those thoughts comforted her, but deep down she feared that this wedding would only remind her of the distance between her and her sister's new world. She worried about how Emily's new family might see her. Would they welcome her as part of their family, or would they see her as a burden, someone who didn't fit their lifestyle? Despite these worries, Sarah stayed strong. She held Adam close, smiled whenever he looked at her, and told herself that no amount of wealth or judgment could erase the love between sisters. Whatever happened, she would always be proud to be there for Emily. Little did she know, this day would not just test her strength, it would change her life forever. Sarah sat at the back of the hall, trying her best to remain unnoticed. She wanted her sister's day to be perfect, without any disturbance. But no matter how much she tried to shrink into the background, she could feel eyes on her. The whispers hadn't stopped since she walked in. People were staring at her dress, her shoes, and even at little Adam. Some looked away quickly when she caught their gaze, but others smirked openly, as if her presence was an odd stain in the grand celebration. Adam, however, was full of excitement. He tugged on her sleeve and whispered, "Mom, can I have some juice? The waiters are carrying so many glasses." His innocent eyes sparkled as he pointed toward a server passing by with a tray. Sarah nodded gently and motioned for a glass. She made sure Adam sat straight and drank carefully, not wanting anyone to think badly of them. But the moment reminded her how different their lives were compared to everyone else here. For other children, such drinks and food were normal. For Adam, they were a rare treat. Sarah tried to focus on Emily. Her sister looked stunning in her white gown, her smile radiant. Watching Emily walk hand in hand with Richard filled Sarah with pride. She thought back to the days when she and Emily were little girls, sharing secrets in their small room at home. Back then, they had both dreamed of growing up, marrying loving husbands, and living happily. Life had given Emily that dream, but it had handed Sarah a different story. Still, Sarah reminded herself that her love for her sister was greater than any pain she carried. The ceremony ended beautifully, with clapping and cheers as the couple exchanged vows. Everyone stood, applauding. Sarah stood too, clapping softly with tears in her eyes. But her happiness was short-lived. As the guests moved to the reception area, Sarah noticed a group of well-dressed women whispering again. One of them glanced directly at her, then leaned toward the others with a look of disgust. Sarah lowered her gaze and held Adam's hand tighter. She wanted to leave quietly after congratulating her sister, but she hadn't had the chance yet. When she finally approached Emily to give her a hug, she could already sense the tension in the air. Emily smiled faintly but seemed nervous. Before Sarah could speak, Richard's mother, a tall woman with sharp eyes, stepped in. She looked Sarah up and down, then frowned. "Emily, who is this?" she asked coldly. Emily hesitated, glancing at Sarah before answering softly, "This is my sister, Sarah." Richard's mother raised her eyebrows. "Your sister?" Her voice was filled with disbelief. "She doesn't look prepared for such an event." Her words were soft but loud enough for those nearby to hear. A few guests chuckled under their breath. Sarah's cheeks burned with embarrassment. She wanted to disappear, but Adam squeezed her hand, and she forced herself to stand tall. "I'm here for my sister," Sarah said gently, trying to keep her voice steady. "I wouldn't miss her wedding for anything." But her words did not soften the mood. Richard's mother turned to Emily with disapproval. "You should have told me she was coming. We must keep appearances. People are noticing." Sarah felt her heart sink. She wanted to tell the woman that appearances didn't matter, that family was more important than wealth or fancy clothes, but the lump in her throat stopped her. She didn't want to cause trouble for Emily on her big day. She simply nodded and stepped back. But the situation didn't end there. As the evening continued, Richard's relatives and some of his wealthy friends began to openly criticize. One whispered, "She shouldn't be here. Look at her dress." Another said, "It's embarrassing. This is supposed to be a high-class wedding." Sarah tried to ignore them, but each word cut deeper into her heart. Things became worse when Adam accidentally dropped his juice glass. It slipped from his small hands and shattered on the floor. The hall grew quiet for a moment. A waiter quickly rushed to clean it, but before he could, Richard's aunt exclaimed, "Oh dear, this is exactly what happens when you allow such people in. They don't know how to behave." Adam's eyes filled with tears. He looked up at his mother, scared and ashamed. Sarah knelt down and hugged him tightly, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Accidents happen." She kissed his hair and wiped his tears, but inside she was breaking. She hated seeing her son humiliated like this, especially for something so small. The whispers grew louder, and soon, one of the organizers came over. He cleared his throat awkwardly before saying, "Ma'am, I think it would be better if you waited outside. Some of the guests are uncomfortable." Sarah froze. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Outside?" she asked, her voice trembling. "But I'm the bride's sister. I just wanted to be here for her." The man looked away, avoiding her eyes. "I'm sorry. But the family insists." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them back. She didn't want Adam to see her cry. She took a deep breath and nodded slowly. Holding her son's hand, she turned toward the door. Each step felt heavier than the last. The laughter and music behind her seemed to fade, replaced by the sound of her own pounding heart. As she reached the entrance, she glanced back at Emily. Her sister stood frozen, her face pale, caught between two worlds, the love for her sister and the pressure from her new family. Sarah gave her a small smile, as if to say, "Don't worry about me." Then she turned and continued walking. Adam whispered, "Mom, why are we leaving?" "I wanted to see Aunt Emily cut the cake." His voice was filled with confusion. Sarah's throat tightened. She didn't know how to explain cruelty to a child so innocent. She squeezed his hand gently and said, "We'll celebrate together at home, just you and me. We don't need a big hall to be happy." But inside, she was hurting more than ever. She had never felt so humiliated, so unwanted. It wasn't just about her, it was about her son. He didn't deserve to feel like an outsider in his own family. Sarah tried to stay strong, but her eyes blurred with tears as they stepped out of the glittering hall and into the cold night. What she didn't know was that someone inside had been watching. Someone who had seen everything: the whispers, the humiliation, and the quiet dignity with which she carried herself. And that person was about to change everything. The night air outside the wedding hall was colder than Sarah had expected. She held Adam's hand tightly as they stepped onto the pavement. The glowing lights of the grand celebration spilled out from the open doors, yet she and her son stood in the shadows, unnoticed and unwanted. Cars pulled up, guests laughed as they entered, their fine clothes glimmering under the street lamps. No one seemed to care about the woman and her child who had just been asked to leave. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady her heart. She could feel Adam's eyes on her, wide and questioning. He didn't fully understand what had happened inside, but he knew enough to sense that something was wrong. "Mom," he whispered softly, "did we do something bad?" The words pierced Sarah's heart. She knelt down in front of him, brushing the hair from his forehead. "No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. We just don't belong there." She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "We belong with each other, and that's enough." Adam nodded, though his small face still carried confusion. He didn't argue, but Sarah could see the sadness in his eyes. She hated that he had to witness such cruelty at such a young age. Childhood was supposed to be full of joy, laughter, and safety. Instead, Adam was learning about humiliation and rejection. They walked slowly away from the hall, Sarah's heart heavy with every step. She thought of Emily, her younger sister, who had once promised that they would always stand by each other no matter what. Sarah didn't blame her completely. She knew Emily was under immense pressure from her new in-laws, but the silence hurt. A single word of defense, a single act of courage, could have changed everything. Instead, Emily had chosen to stand still, and that choice spoke louder than words. The memory of the guests' whispers replayed in Sarah's mind. Their mocking eyes, their cruel comments, the way they had looked at her and Adam as if they were less than human, it all echoed inside her. She felt anger rising, but it quickly dissolved into sadness. She was used to being judged for being poor, for being a single mother, but tonight had been different. Tonight, the rejection had come from her own family's side, and that pain cut deeper than anything she had experienced before. She wondered if she had made a mistake coming at all. Maybe she should have stayed home, spared herself and Adam the humiliation. She had thought love would be enough, love for her sister, love for family, but in that glittering hall, love had been silenced by wealth and pride. As they reached the corner of the street, Sarah sat on a bench with Adam. He leaned against her shoulder, still holding her hand. She could tell he was tired, but he didn't complain. She kissed the top of his head and whispered, "I'm sorry, baby. I wanted you to see something beautiful today. I didn't know it would turn out like this." Adam looked up at her with innocent eyes and said, "It's okay, Mom. I only wanted to be with you. That's enough for me." His words were simple, but they warmed Sarah's heart. She hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. Sometimes, children carried more wisdom than adults. As the minutes passed, Sarah began to think about her life again. This moment of humiliation was not the first time she had been looked down upon, and she feared it wouldn't be the last. She remembered the times when shopkeepers had spoken to her harshly because she paid with small coins, the neighbors who gossiped about her being alone, and the times employers had dismissed her struggles as unimportant. Every day was a test of strength. But tonight had been different. Tonight, she had been shown the clear line between two worlds, the world of wealth and the world of survival. She looked at Adam, who had now rested his head on her lap, half asleep. For him, she had endured everything. For him, she had worked until her body ached, skipped meals, and swallowed her pride. For him, she had walked into that wedding hall with courage, even when she knew she didn't fit in. And for him, she would continue to fight. But deep inside, Sarah couldn't deny the truth, she longed for a better life. Not for luxury or riches, but for dignity, stability, and respect. She didn't want Adam to grow up believing he was less than anyone else. She didn't want him to remember his childhood as a time filled with rejection. She wanted him to dream freely, to feel proud of who he was, and to have opportunities she never had. As she sat lost in thought, she didn't notice that someone had been watching from a distance. Back inside the hall, Daniel, a well-known businessman and family friend of Richard's, had witnessed the entire incident. He had seen how Sarah was humiliated, how she kept her composure, and how she walked out with quiet strength. Unlike the others, he wasn't blinded by wealth or appearances. What he saw in Sarah was dignity, courage, and a heart full of love for her child. Daniel had grown up in hardship himself. His mother had raised him alone after his father's passing, working long hours to give him a chance at education. He knew what it meant to be poor, to feel judged, to carry burdens silently. Seeing Sarah reminded him of his own mother, of her struggles and her strength. He couldn't ignore it. Inside the hall, the celebration continued with music, laughter, and clinking glasses, but Daniel's mind was elsewhere. He excused himself from the crowd and stepped outside. His eyes searched the street until he found Sarah sitting on the bench with Adam. Something in his chest tightened. She looked so fragile, yet so strong. Sarah, unaware of his presence, wiped her tears quickly when Adam stirred. She didn't want him to see her broken. "Everything will be okay," she whispered to herself, though she wasn't sure she believed it. At that moment, Daniel took a step closer, ready to speak. Sarah didn't hear the footsteps approaching at first. She was too lost in her thoughts, too busy trying to calm her own heart while stroking Adam's hair as he dozed lightly on her lap. But then a gentle voice broke the silence. "Are you all right?" Sarah lifted her head quickly, startled. Standing before her was a tall man in a dark suit, his expression calm but full of concern. It was Daniel, though Sarah didn't recognize him immediately. She had seen him briefly inside the hall, speaking with important guests, but she hadn't imagined someone like him would ever walk out to speak to her. For a moment, she hesitated. She wasn't used to strangers noticing her pain. Most people turned away when they saw someone struggling. She swallowed hard and forced a small smile. "Yes, we're fine," she said softly. "Thank you." Daniel studied her face for a moment. Her eyes were red from crying, though she tried to hide it. Her dress was simple but neatly kept, and her hands rested protectively on the small boy's shoulders. He could see how tired she looked, yet there was strength in her eyes, the kind of strength that comes from carrying heavy burdens without complaint. "I saw what happened inside," Daniel said gently. His words made Sarah's chest tighten. She looked down, embarrassed, wishing he hadn't witnessed her humiliation. "I'm sorry if it caused trouble," she whispered. "I didn't mean to disturb anyone. I just wanted to be there for my sister." "There was no disturbance," Daniel replied firmly. "The only wrong thing was how you were treated. No one deserves that. Especially not you." Sarah blinked in surprise. People rarely defended her. Most times, she was either ignored or judged. His words felt unexpected, almost unreal. She didn't know how to respond, so she stayed silent, stroking Adam's hair again as if to anchor herself. Daniel crouched down slightly so he was on Adam's level. "And who's this young man?" he asked kindly. Adam stirred and opened his eyes, blinking sleepily. He sat up and rubbed his eyes before answering softly, "I'm Adam." Daniel smiled warmly. "Nice to meet you, Adam. You know, you were very brave in there." Adam tilted his head, confused. "Brave? But I dropped the glass." Daniel chuckled softly and shook his head. "That doesn't matter. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is you didn't let it stop you from standing with your mom. That's real bravery." Adam's lips curved into a shy smile, and he leaned against his mother again. Sarah's heart softened at the sight. For once, someone was speaking to her son with kindness instead of criticism. Daniel stood again and looked at Sarah seriously. "Please, come back inside." Her eyes widened. "Back inside?" After everything that just happened? No, I can't. They don't want us there. I don't want to cause Emily any more trouble. You're her sister, Daniel said firmly. You have every right to be there. And your son deserves to be there too. No one has the authority to tell you otherwise. Family is not about wealth or appearances, it's about love. And I won't stand by while people forget that. Sarah's lips parted, but no words came out. She wanted to believe him, but fear held her back. She had felt the sting of humiliation once already. To walk back inside felt impossible. Sensing her hesitation, Daniel softened his tone. I know what it feels like, he said quietly. I was raised by a single mother. We didn't have much, but she gave me everything she could. People used to look down on us too. But I learned something: kindness and dignity are worth more than all the money in the world. Tonight, you showed more dignity than anyone in that hall. Sarah's eyes welled with tears. No one had ever spoken to her like that. She bit her lip and turned away slightly, afraid she might cry in front of him. Daniel extended his hand toward her. Let me walk you back inside. Not as someone poor or out of place, but as an honored guest. Because that's what you are. For a long moment, Sarah stared at his hand. She thought of leaving, of taking Adam home and pretending the night had never happened. But then she thought of Emily, of how she had come to share in her sister's joy. She thought of Adam, who had looked forward to celebrating. And she thought of herself, how long she had carried her struggles silently, how much she wanted to be seen as more than just a burden. Slowly, she reached out and placed her hand in Daniel's. His grip was steady, reassuring. Adam looked up at them curiously, and when Daniel offered his other hand, the boy took it without hesitation. Together, they walked back toward the hall. As they stepped through the grand doors, conversations inside paused. The music softened, and all eyes turned toward them. The same guests who had whispered and judged earlier now watched in shock. Daniel walked with confidence, his presence commanding respect. With Sarah and Adam at his side, no one dared to laugh or whisper. He led them straight to the front, where Emily and Richard stood. Emily's eyes widened at the sight of her sister returning. For a moment, she looked worried, but then she noticed Daniel holding Sarah's hand, and relief washed over her face. Daniel cleared his throat and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. This woman is Sarah, the bride's sister. She is not only welcome here, she belongs here. And if anyone believes otherwise, then they have forgotten what family truly means. A silence swept across the room. Some lowered their heads, ashamed. Others avoided his gaze. No one dared to argue with him. His words carried weight, not just because of who he was, but because they rang with truth. Emily stepped forward quickly, her eyes filling with tears. She reached out and hugged Sarah tightly. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I should have defended you. I let fear stop me, but I love you, Sarah. Please forgive me. Sarah hugged her back, her own tears flowing freely now. I just wanted to be here for you, she whispered. That's all. Adam smiled brightly, holding onto both his mother and his aunt. For the first time that evening, he felt included, loved, and safe. Daniel placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. No more apologies. Let's make sure the rest of this night is filled with joy. The music began again, and slowly the celebration resumed. But this time, the whispers stopped. Guests treated Sarah and Adam with newfound respect, careful not to repeat their earlier cruelty. Daniel stayed close by, making sure they felt included. For Sarah, the pain of humiliation had not disappeared completely, but something new had taken its place: hope. Hope that kindness still existed in the world. Hope that her sister's love was still strong. And hope that maybe, just maybe, This unexpected man who had stepped into her life could change it in ways she never imagined. The rest of the wedding night passed in a way Sarah could hardly believe. Where there had once been whispers and judgment, there was now silence and respect. Though she still felt the weight of the humiliation she had endured, she also felt something stronger, a sense of dignity restored, not by wealth or status, but by someone finally standing beside her when she needed it most. Daniel did not leave her side. He made sure she and Adam were treated like family, guiding them through the dinner line, speaking with them during the meal, and introducing them kindly to people who had previously ignored them. Sarah noticed the change in the way people looked at her now. No one dared to mock her, not when Daniel's presence made it clear that she mattered. It was not about wealth, it was about the respect he demanded for her. Adam enjoyed the evening as though nothing painful had happened earlier. He laughed when a waiter brought him an extra piece of cake, and he clapped his hands excitedly during the music. Seeing him so happy made Sarah's heart lighter. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to relax, even if only for a few hours. When the night finally came to an end, Sarah thanked Daniel quietly. "You didn't have to do all that," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But you did. I don't know how to thank you." Daniel shook his head gently. "You don't owe me anything. You deserved it. And your son deserved it. Don't ever let anyone make you believe otherwise." Those words stayed with her even as she returned home with Adam. Lying in bed that night, Sarah stared at the ceiling of her small apartment, thinking about everything that had happened. She had walked into the wedding fearing judgment, and she had been dragged out in shame. But she had also walked back in with dignity, and she owed that to a stranger who understood her pain. For the first time in years, Sarah felt seen. In the days that followed, Sarah expected life to return to its usual struggles. She returned to work at the grocery store, cleaned houses in the evenings, and stretched every coin to cover her bills. Yet, something inside her had changed. She no longer carried herself with the same quiet shame. She remembered Daniel's words about dignity and family, and she repeated them to herself whenever the world felt heavy. Then, one afternoon, as she was finishing her shift at the store, she saw a familiar figure waiting outside. It was Daniel. He smiled as she walked out, surprised and a little nervous to see him. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said politely. Sarah blinked in surprise. "No, of course not. I just didn't expect to see you here. I was in the area," Daniel explained. "And I thought maybe I could take you and Adam for a meal. Nothing fancy. Just a chance to talk." Sarah hesitated, unused to such kindness. But when she thought of Adam, who rarely got to enjoy anything beyond the basics, she nodded slowly. "All right. Thank you." That evening, they sat together at a small family restaurant. Adam chatted happily between bites of food, and Daniel listened with genuine interest, asking him about school and his favorite things. Sarah watched quietly, touched by how naturally Daniel connected with her son. Most people barely acknowledged Adam, but Daniel spoke to him as though he mattered, and to Sarah, that meant more than anything. Over the weeks that followed, Daniel's presence in their lives grew stronger. He never pushed, never made Sarah feel like she owed him. Instead, he offered gentle support. Sometimes he would bring books or toys for Adam. Other times, he would drop by just to ask how their day had been. He listened when Sarah spoke about her struggles, never judging, only encouraging. Slowly, a bond formed not out of pity, but out of respect and understanding. Sarah found herself opening up in ways she hadn't in years. She told Daniel about the nights she had cried herself to sleep, the mornings she had forced a smile for Adam despite her exhaustion, the times she had felt invisible in a world that valued money more than kindness. Daniel listened quietly, his eyes full of empathy. When she finished, he simply said, "You are stronger than you realize." You've given your son more than most children ever receive: love, resilience, and hope. Sarah had never thought of it that way. She had always seen her life as a series of shortcomings, of things she couldn't provide. But Daniel's words painted her sacrifices in a new light. Months passed, and their friendship grew. Adam adored Daniel, often asking when they would see him again. Sarah, too, began to look forward to his visits, though she tried not to show it too much. She didn't want to hope for more than what was there. Life had taught her not to expect miracles. But one evening, as they sat together at the park watching Adam play, Daniel turned to her with quiet seriousness. "Sarah," he began, "I don't want to overstep. But I want you to know something. You're not alone anymore. Whatever burdens you carry, you don't have to carry them all by yourself." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. No one had ever said those words to her before. She had always been alone, always the one holding everything together. To hear someone offer to share that weight was almost overwhelming. "I don't know what the future holds," Daniel continued, "but I do know that I want to be part of your lives. If you'll let me." Sarah looked at him, her heart racing. She saw sincerity in his eyes, not pity, not charity, but genuine care. Slowly, she nodded. "I'd like that," she whispered. From that moment on, Sarah's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. It wasn't sudden wealth or luxury, it was something deeper. It was the comfort of knowing she wasn't invisible anymore, that someone saw her worth and stood beside her. It was the joy of watching Adam laugh freely, knowing he had more people to love and care for him. It was the strength of being able to dream again, not just survive. Looking back, Sarah realized that the night of Emily's wedding had been more than just a painful memory. It had been a turning point. She had walked in with fear, been dragged out in shame, and walked back in with dignity. And from that night, her path had shifted towards something new, something brighter. She often thought of Daniel's words, "Family is not about wealth or appearances, it's about love." And as she watched Adam grow with laughter and hope, as she found herself smiling more often than crying, she knew those words would stay with her forever. Sarah, the poor single mom who had once felt invisible, had discovered that even the darkest moments could lead to unexpected light. All it took was courage, love, and someone who believed in her when the world turned away. And with that, her story was no longer just about struggle, it was about strength, dignity, and the promise of new beginnings.